Again, welcome to Track Talk with Charley Drayton, and please welcome the man himself, Charley Drayton.
Heart is probably a personal favorite of yours because I don't know who else out there, is even in touch with it.
It's a personal favorite of many people. Many people. The more I know about this song, it's I just feel like you dig down into a place for this song that I have to think had so much to do with the people that were in the room with you at the time,
Sure.
who were not insignificant humans and incredible musicians. So, in fact, we can dive in there and just first of all, you work with the Stones on the Dirty Work record. I know that in 85,
Um,
86.
so I guess its release was 86. So we'd say around 1985 in New York City. The band was recording in New York, um, downtown at a studio that was once called RPM.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Steve may have run into Ron Wood at some time around then, and he had invited Steve to come to RPM. And then one night, Steve and I went down there together. And then from that point, Charley, I think, had just left town. And the rest of the group was, working on tracks that they had recorded together. Charley had left, his drum kit was still set up in RPM. So,
Yeah.
gradually the jams started to begin. And that was my first time meeting Keith then, and Mick as well. Bill wasn't around by the time I was there to visit those sessions.
Yeah.
So by the beginning of somewhere in early 87, I was in New York, but I believe Steve had begun hanging out with Keith a bit, and they were sneaking off to this room called Studio 900 downtown in Chelsea. And eventually one night, Steve asked me to come by there. And then we started playing together a bit as a trio.
And you were playing bass in that situation? Or
Mostly,
both?
yes.
Mostly.
Mostly, like, we would just bounce around on an idea. And, if Steve was out of the room, and Keith was in the room, we would just interact on, whatever the motion of music was in the air at the moment. And that began to form into the shape of something in the air was beginning to change. Like,
yeah,
this feels like a
meaning
seed is sprouting.
like the whole idea of the Winos and the record, just the idea of Keith having all this material that was he wanted to
Well, the
record.
Winos hadn't come about yet. I think Keith was just thinking about these possibilities of ideas, and he was jamming with Steve, and then I started to come around, and some of the basic ideas of songs started to take shape in these little sections of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like How I Wish, and a few, I don't have the track titles in front of me, but a few of those early ideas started to come into the picture. And Keith may have had some part of that riff to Take It So Hard going, and Steve might have been playing drums when that seed had begun. And, unconsciously, either had not found the route, the right motion for the bass part or something, or Steve had walked in the room and he picked up the bass and I stepped behind the drums and something just began to land. Mm-hmm. A feeling or the shape, the pulse that sort of made it seem like it was moving the right way. The song wasn't complete in New York. Maybe none of them were complete because the lyrics were not, I don't think one lyric was fully written as those songs were taking shape. There were ideas and just taking notes and stuff,
Yeah.
So by July, Waddy, Ivan, myself, Steve, and Keith, we went to Morin Heights, which is where Lay Studio lived, which people would mostly know. Several Rush records were recorded there.
Okay, yeah.
Because we saw some of their videos from the studio of them playing in the room and stuff, and that was the room that we all went up to Canada and with a bunch of gear, and that may have been where the actual idea of the title, The Expensive Winos, had sort of entered the room.
Dig it. Yeah. And so with that particular song, and you've sort of said it or touched on it. I've always wondered how you and Steve, and for people watching, we're talking about Steve in a very familiar way, but we're talking about the great Steve Jordan, of course. And so it was really organic, Charley, in the way that Steve just sort of picked up the bass, or you just sat behind the drums and while the idea was forming, and that's just how it happened. It wasn't like Steve saying, Charley, I'll play bass on this one, because you're both great bass players and, of course, incredible drummers. And that was always a question, like how it came about that you played, because you played bass on most of the other songs, right, on the record.
I'm primarily the bass player in Keith's group.
Yeah.
So we just happen to have these extra utility tools to play with, because it's all about making the song,
Sure.
That's our attitude towards it. And so we didn't have our minds set on anything. Like I said, we just bounced around the room and found that, it's beginning to feel a certain way like this. And I might have walked in the room and Steve was just playing the bass along with Keith. And it seemed like he was comfortable there. Yeah. I sat down and then we just worked on the idea that way. And it just felt like that's the next time we touch on it, let's start here,
Yeah. Did you, when you first started playing and just when you guys were just jamming, was what we hear in the record pretty close to what you started with? I mean, did you kind of have that idea right from, like, and you're playing the intro as you come in and you're playing the floor tom, kind of like, and the snare drum on 2 and 4, just kind of like riding the floor tom and
yes,
the verse. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the most part, if Keith had that would be the groove or the part we would jam, and he would throw out some melody ideas or, something to take him a little further with it. So that was generally the feel of it. I guess my instincts would guide me to the floor tom first before the metal,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a well, I don't have to tell you,
especially like when he plays a riff and then we lay on the one chord during the verse a bit. So we're all just playing something a little bit more rhythm oriented together.
Yeah. So
to me, my first instinct is we don't need the metal so much. Right. Keith's in that, there's something to speak about in Keith forming a band to work with while the Stones were working out what the next phase of the Stones were going to be, was that it really highlights just how wonderful of a musician Keith really is, because he's the anchor in the Stones a certain way of responsibility to the group. Having Ivan, Waddy, myself, and Steve there is a different kind of responsibility for Keith that just gives him this foundation to be this other player. And it really, you know, in the room with the Winos really, really highlights Keith in a different way about his guitar playing, his abilities were just so wonderful to see that and be a part of, you know.
Absolutely. And you know, that song and the whole record really, but that song, since we're talking about Take It So Hard, has just always sounded so organic to me. Like just so you know, like it sounds like you probably didn't do a lot of takes. It sounds like you might have even got it on one or two. Like it would spoil the magic of that. You know what I mean?
You're on to something.
And we've never talked about this, so I'm just saying it has that vibe of like that spontaneity that you associate with Keith. It's like, guys, I got this idea, I got this riff. Just come on, just come, you know, just come on and let's do this. And is that kind of how it happened?
I would say when we left New York, we had the form of a structure, a cycle of the song, like the verse, the chorus. There's not a bridge, there's a solo.
Yeah, yeah.
Which would act like sort of the bridge, you know. I think we had the shape of that. It was just what kind of arrangement did we want to make, because the lyric or the story wasn't completed, you know, when we went to Canada. So, and at that time, that was the only song that I remember that I was going to play drums on. So, and you mentioned sound, and this would be a good moment for me to really bring into the conversation the importance of the sound and that Red Cloud. Don Smith, gosh, you know, it's emotional to reach back. You know, I haven't listened to the original recording in about 3 years, because 3 years ago was Keith had released the anniversary package of the album. Yeah. Like, to imagine that 30 years had come around.
Yeah.
But thinking about this really brings the importance of what Don Smith brought to the sound of a new unit and the chemistry of us, you know.
Was Don Smith was the engineer?
He was the engineer.
Engineer, yeah.
And he made it. He made that all happen. Which brings me back to the story with Take It So Hard. Was the first night we got to the studio. The studio was also a place that had, you know, we also, you know, it had accommodation and housing and everything. Mm-hmm. And so the plan was, on the first day, was the crew was setting up gear, you know, Rogan was there, Chooch was still there. And we were gonna, you know, set up the gear, have a look around, you know, have dinner, which we did. And then, you know, we walked back into the room after dinner, you know, to had to sort of have some fun. We'd had our little wine, this and that, and the whole kind of, you know, ceremonial first night together and everything. And, you know, Don was adamant. I just sort of remember the conversation. We're just like gonna like go for some sounds, just get some sounds, have some fun,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and the party got started. And before dinner, I remember we were messing with like Eileen or some other idea like that. And after, because Keith played standard tuning
Oh,
on most of the pieces, but Take It So Hard is one in which he plays 5-string.
yeah. Yeah. It's that
And
sound. Yeah.
after dinner, you know, after a nice little dinner tweet, he was in the mood to kind of see how his 5-string felt. And I heard him start playing the riff. And the initial setup day in the studio was setting up Steve's drum set, me getting the whole bass rig situation, for me focusing on that. So, you know, gear wise, I brought a few sets up. There was a truck full of just drum gear because,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, Steve had gear he wanted there. I brought a few sets up. But the initial setup on the floor was a kit that Steve had, which, if I remember correctly, I was trying to think about this. You know, we both played Yamaha quite a bit back in that period. So I knew we had some Yamaha stuff there. I think he'd had his Ames 22-inch bass drum at that time,
Mm-hmm.
because that was definitely in the set on the first tour. And I think it was either the Ames 22-inch bass drum, Steve's Black Gretsch toms, which I believe are the ones would have been on Preface of Blues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blues Brothers. And that was been the first time I'd seen him pull those toms out again, in a long time. And on that day, after dinner, when he started playing the 5-string and playing the riff, I went over to the drum set, and I believe the snare drum was Steve's Leedy. It was a 6.5 by 14. It was a Leedy 40s Marine Pearl snare drum, which, if I remember correctly, if there's a John Scofield record called Electric Outlet and a track called Filibuster that I think is the same snare drum. And we started playing the tune, and I'm going to myself, there's something in the air right now that, like, seems like we're heading out of just testing out the sound and heading into like a take. Something's about to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, Steve had some cymbals up, and I remember wanting to reach for, I was like, wow, the Leedy sounds good, because I was thinking about, I'd had another snare drum in mind for it. And was thinking of another drum set in mind for it initially. So I remember grabbing at the time, remember the Amirs?
Yes.
The Zildjian Amir line?
Yes.
Well, I was
Yeah.
pretty deep into the Amirs at that stage. And
Okay.
I'd reached for the a set of Amir hi-hats, but also at the time I had collected a couple of the Paiste color sounds, and I'd matched a blue color sound with one of the Amir tops, and that was the set that I was into at the time, because it had more of a dry tone to it. And
Yeah. And were they 18s, Charlie, or 16s?
no, we hadn't I hadn't landed on that. I had softer, bigger, larger cymbals at the time, but this was like before the custom K thing had started. A few years later, when I finally landed on the larger, this was on Take It So Hard, was a set of 15s.
15s. Okay. All right.
Right.
That's a big
And
mystery.
with sort of the dry texture, also had a nice, not a full lower tone, but something that was at a sort of the mid-range of the guitar thing just enough.
Yeah.
Because that was part of my whole process at landing at, you know, through most of the 80s, we went, you know, everything that we would hear on the radio, you know, the sound of music went through this, you know, this very mid-rangey, you know, phase. And we've had, we'll have to say part of this discussion, because this is, if we open that can of worms right now to getting to the large thing, we have a long discussion to have about the purpose of the large.
Well, I asked about if there were 16s or 18s, because when I listen to that song, and I'm going to play it in a minute, at least a little bit of it, the hi-hats, well, to your point, as far as the lowness and that sort of mid-range, they sound like bigger than, bigger than 15s to me. You know what I mean? Like 15s sound to me nowadays almost like 14s, not that much different compared to what you use now and what 16s and 18s sound like. But man, that's interesting. So it's I guess it's that combination, as you say, of the dryness of that color sound, and it's a hi-hat top. It's not a crash cymbal. It's like a hi-hat top or bottom in a.
The Amir was still an official hi-hat top.
Yeah. Okay. And then
the
a color sound
the color sound was probably a top, because I like the weight of cymbals to be close and not.
Yes.
That's the other discussion we have to have, because you and I go back to a time when I called you and said, John, I need to talk to you about the new beat concept and why that had all got to where it was, because music was, sound-wise, was taking sort of it was going to a certain place, and I was trying to get to the bottom of it, because I amongst the frequency range of so much music, especially in the 80s, was like I really wanted to get my tone and the sound to get things in a different scope of how we're hearing things, and that was what really opened me up to finding, which started with the 15s, finding lower tones when we could. Now that's more possible,
right. And as you say, using a lighter bottom will give you that, using a bottom that's a closer weight, not to get into all this, drum paraphernalia now, but that's a good point that you make, that having those two cymbals close in weight will achieve that sound you're talking about, that
well, that's what I was used to. That's what I grew
washy,
up. That's what, that's kind of was seeing the standard. That's kind of my first hi-hat cymbals were all closer balanced weights, So I've just kind of stuck to what felt good to me, But I hadn't really landed on the larger until a few years after. I think most of the stuff on that record is still 14s or 15s.
Yeah. Yep. Interesting. We could show everybody what that snare drum was, if this is a good time to do that.
Well, that's not the snare drum on the record. The snare drum on the record is Steve's white Morin Pearl Leedy 6.5 by 14.
Wow. Okay, it is. All right.
Yeah. The snare, the surprise you want to present is the 15-inch brass snare drum that I used on the Saturday Night Live performance.
I see. Okay.
And it
got it.
May have been the last time I'd actually played that drum for a great long time.
Dig it. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to it. I think I want to keep on this track that we're on right now, just talking about the drum kit. So maybe just to revisit this for 1 second, could possibly be an Eames 22-inch bass drum.
Yep. Or Steve's, or
Gretsch.
One of Steve's recording custom bass drums. One of the two of those.
Okay.
The toms with the two black Gretsch, which was a 12 and a 14.
Okay, 12 and a 14. Yep.
and just one floor at that time.
Yep. Okay. And the rest of the cymbals, were they a mix of Steve's Pisces that
I remember
or
changing. I remember changing the set of hi-hats, and Steve has a Turkish Zildjian 22 that I remember was on the kick, because I hear that tone. I know it was his, because which I believe he'd either got at the pro shop when the pro shop was still open, and Manny's had come across a good small batch of those right around the early 80s. And I remember I remember like anyone that got the word would flee to Manny's and grab, like, whenever anything surfaced like that.
yeah, yeah.
I ended up getting one which I still have to this day, which is in my road case right now. But I remember Steve's being on the stand. We might have had another like 18 crash up, and I changed the hi-hat cymbals. But when I know I hit that ride cymbal and Take It So Hard, I think that's Steve's ride cymbal, and that was pretty much what was up. So I'm sitting down now, and I'm just getting comfortable, because I feel like we might just we're falling into trying to play an arrangement of the song. I'm not going to even say cut the track,
Yeah. Yeah.
And we played it a few times, and we walked into the control room, and something just felt like we landed. And I can't say that we knew when we actually played the one of the two, three, I can't say in the moment that we knew we landed while we were playing it. We played it a few times, maybe three, and the second one, perhaps it's the second one, felt like the magic was there,
Yeah.
at least for then, because our part of our process was, for the songs that we went to Canada with, that we would play something, come back to it a day or two later, see if the arrangement would be, because remember, the stories are not, the lyrics are not complete. Right. So we might just come back to something the next day, revisit an idea, go to another. But memory serves me that kind of that night, the night we were only supposed to be getting sounds, that Take It So Hard would be hard to beat. And I remember we did try it a couple of days later, but we all kind of knew. It just had happened after dinner on the first night. And I believe that may have been also the first night that Keith was looking out around the room and realized the good wine is gone. And these are the expensive winos. It kind of landed there,
Wow.
So, yeah.
Man. And yeah, I mean, you had to have all felt it, like just knowing you had it, I got to think, Keith knew, you knew, Steve, Ivan, Waddy, everybody knew that you'd got it. And so when you recorded that, Charley, was it pretty much the whole band live except like the vocals? Was there much done? Was it what you hear pretty much what the rhythm track? I know probably Keith added a guitar, I'm guessing, or.
Well, everybody was set up in the room together. We could wear headphones or not, because there was, there's band leakage. I think Ivan, if he was not playing piano, if he was playing a keyboard, then we would wear headphones to hear Ivan, and also to hear that Keith, there'd be a vocal mic, you know, on in the room for him to sing into while he was playing. So to keep that whole live feel of us playing together. And let's not forget that this is pretty much the first time that the unit is all together playing. And there was just this moment that this information was all passing through us at the same time. And we, you know, an hour or so later, we're realizing we've now taken a step together, and it was a big step.
Yeah, man.
And we were hearing the beginning of what turned out to be Take It So Hard. I mean, you could ask anyone else in the that was in the room, they'll all have a different story about it, you know, in certain details, but you know, that just happened to be the first thing that had landed for us, where I'm predominantly the bass player in the band.
Yeah. Did you, Charley, when you started playing, like initially the groove, were you maybe unconsciously channeling Charlie Watts? I mean, were you kind of in that moment, not to say you wouldn't come up with your own idea, but it's like if Charlie Watts had played that song, I think he'd have played exactly what you played. And he was a big fan of yours, as you know, but you'll never.
Well, Charlie was so supportive, you know, to what we were doing with Keith, and that was important for us, for Steve and I, and you know, without Charlie's presence and his spirit in the room, because we know how much he means to Keith, that like we wouldn't be there, you know, without the essence of Charlie in the spirit of it. As well, to know that because it's us there with Keith, we also have to take that to whatever place helps us create our voice together, so that we're doing something together. And that, because there's, could you imagine, with some of the material that had come through Keith at that time, if you think about what that would have sounded like in the Rolling Stones' hands, especially that the year or two before, they were kind of going through working out some of the growing pains of the Rolling Stones. And then Mick had put out, like, what kind of got the itch going to Keith and X-Pensive Winos was that Mick had put out a solo record, and sometimes you got to be careful what fire you're starting, because
that definitely lit a fire under Keith. I mean, he came out,
and those songs came out, and that that could have been a great Rolling Stones record, or half of, in whatever way they would have collaborated on that, had that been material for them. But, this was, it was ended up being a healthy place for them to try to work out their stuff.
Yeah. Well, Charley, if you don't mind, and I apologize, I was confused on the snare drum. That you clarified that. Thank you. That you actually used on the record. But could we bring in the special guest we talked about, that with the drum that you used on Saturday Night Live? All right.
Yes, please.
So special surprise for everybody watching at home, and give us just a moment while these folks join. There's that echo again. Yikes. Wow.
Got you.
Hey.
All right. And so here we have Pierre de Beauport. There's that echo. Who is Keith Richards' guitar tech for...
Keith Richards, guitar tech for...
Turn you down. Right? Completely down. We'll just go off of this.
Wow, boy, that echoes
There's
something.
the delay.
And also Don McAulay,
And then-
Charlie Watts' tech, and now Steve Jordan's drum tech.
But we're
So,
here to talk about this man right here.
yes,
Talk
yes,
about Soul
indeed.
Sponge.
Soul Sponge. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining, and thanks for your patience.
Hey, just so you all know, this is the single of Take It So Hard. And what's really quite interesting is credited that there's 2 songs, and the other side would be Could Have Stood You Up. But actually, if you look at the vinyl, both sides are Take It So Hard. So it's a misprint, and both sides are Take It So Hard on the first single.
I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look
All
at
right.
that. Wow. Huh.
But in fact, the vinyl, which, hey, Don, show them what you got. Look.
What's that? Oh, well, this is the snare drum, I believe, that you're talking about, right? Is this the one?
That is the one, and what Charlie has told us is that is the drum that he used on the Saturday Night Live performance.
You can still find a little bit of the sparkle stuff that just came up, you know, from the cymbal.
Yeah,
That's
right. Yes, of course.
Yeah, look at that.
Look at that.
It's a beauty.
And that, Don, what is that? That's a
It's
a 30s?
15, right? Well, that guy knows.
yeah,
But
Charlie. So tell us about this drum.
It's 15-inch by 14,
Hmm.
and it is a leady, right?
Yeah.
And it was Kenny Aronoff who had brought to my attention Charley Donnelly and the collection that he had up in Massachusetts. Am I right? And
Or Connecticut or Massachusetts somewhere.
Connecticut, yeah.
Yeah.
okay, and I called him, and he's, I wasn't much of a metal drum player around that time, but it just something, I don't know, had just sparked my interest to, explore some different tone. And he said he had a 15-inch, and he sent it down to New York to me. And, at that point, I began to, mix it up with that drum a bit. And what you got, Pierre?
Nice, Pierre. Look at that.
Take It So Hard, side 1. Watch my hand. Take It So Hard, side 2.
Oh,
Look
gosh,
at
I
that.
wonder if I have those somewhere. Very good, Pierre.
Thank you, Pierre.
So yeah, the wires are what came on the drum. I don't know if they're original, because I'd like to find another set of wire, because I know that at least 1 or 2 strands of the wire have now parted ways with that strand, but it's not a wide strand, but
No,
it's a beautiful drum.
it is a beautiful drum.
Sounds fantastic too, man. It
Yeah.
really does. It's got all the crack, but it's got tons of low end to it as well. It's just, yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's
Look at
gorgeous.
that, man.
Now, was that your first gig too? Was that also that
Were you
evening
guys-
on Night Live?
That, yeah, talk about like putting a little pressure on the situation. That was the first time that we appeared in public anywhere.
Yeah.
So I got to hide behind the drum set, and interestingly enough, that like of the material on that record, that would felt like to, I guess, between Keith and Virgin Records, and that was something they wanted to focus on. And so, our performance, we turned up Saturday Night Live, and that was the first song that we played together. And we had, the blessing of making it feel like we were just playing in a small room to each other. And I think our point came across.
Oh yeah, big time.
Looks
I'd
like
say
you're having
without a
fun,
doubt.
too. Like
Yeah.
you guys are having a lot of fun. You could tell.
Well, we just had some attitude, and yeah.
My favorite part is, for you drummers, is I can hear the snares rattle with the guitar before the drum intro. The whole room's so alive. Keith hits that chord and you hear the sizzle. You hear it. Check it out.
Well, Keith's setup in the room in Morin Heights was, man, within 6 or 7 feet of the drum set. And yeah, so that buzz is real.
You're hearing the sympathetic tones, the sympathetic frequency from his guitar resonating off and the drum
That's right.
opening up as the mics
That's
are
right.
running. Wow.
Man.
Yes, and
I blew
add
it.
a little 2-inch tape hiss, and
Yeah.
we're good to go.
Yeah. I missed that 2-inch tape. Hiss.
Oh, yeah, we all do.
Yeah.
Man,
I
the
just
wreckage.
miss Don Smith so much because he could make digital sound like 2-inch tape.
Yeah. Well, let's
Yeah.
hear a little bit of the song. What do you guys think? Should we?
Okay,
Give it a
so
listen.
let me just add that, like, until 3 years ago, when I haven't listened to the original so much, especially that last year was the release of the 30th anniversary of Main Offender, and back to the memory floss, something I had totally forgotten about was that the X-Pensive Winos had performed in London. I think Pierre was at 91 or 92, and we recorded at once was Town and Country. And so part of the package of Main Offender is a live performance of the X-Pensive Winos, and there is a version of Take It So Hard on that I have listened to in more recent times that I feel really captures the band now after a few years being together, us playing that, you know.
Well, I'm gonna play a little of the record.
Hell yeah, Charlie.
Yeah.
It's that, bro.
Man.
Good stuff.
Man, masterful, a masterpiece.
Johnny,
Yeah,
you'd think I was playing, just by the sound that Don's creating, you'd think I'd be playing really hard, but I think, in the ways of getting a tone like that, you don't get it by playing the drum really, really hard.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. Just enough to
So-
get it. To get it to open up. But you're not overworking the.
Yeah. When I was younger, I was using a heavier stick, but much,
Yeah.
much, a little bit
I
heavier
just-
than what I use now.
And I just want to point out that, stating the obvious here, that what stands out to me is the way you play the floor tom during the verse,
Yes.
and you just hold it down and you leave all that space open for Keith's guitar. And then you do the same thing during the instrumental. You're playing basically the verse part during the instrumental. And what that does is it just leaves all that open sound. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
the drums support, they make a nice layer underneath, but they never get in the way of like Keith's riff. That is just, that's just great musicianship. It's great listening. It's great, understanding of like creating songs and composition, and love it.
Thank you. One thing that kind of brings my memory back to is in hearing that is the pickup. He starts out with a pretty killer riff, and I don't come in with the but I'm boom,
Yeah. Oh, did I lose you
lost-
guys? Sorry about that.
something's. I see your desktop.
That's
Ooh,
all right. Yeah. No, I was gonna try
thank
something
you.
tricky.
I'm just glad it wasn't me.
No, it was me.
Yeah, so I'm like, what's the pickup that's ain't gonna get in the way and just lean us, into the motion, because we are the human clock of our music.
Yeah.
Click, is it either provides some guidance to some music and sometimes it doesn't, but our human clock was a big part of our chemistry together. And looking back, I'm there's I don't feel there's anything I would have changed, that my pickup is actually on the and of 4. And that's, to me, to someone like myself, like if you've ever played guitar before or you're in a band, who likes to get the most excited in the band with the feeling?
The drummer.
No,
No, the guitar player.
you put the guitar player, right? So, without being too rude or without always keeping the music forward and what's good for the music, but also, this band is full of attitude and so is the song. But hearing that again, like and thinking about the breakdown of it all now, is I start on the and of 4. So it's like, boom, boom, boom. It's like, guys, we're gonna hang around here for this here, and then when we go cross over, so in the drive of that, so imagine if my interpretation of the whole thing was it would be a whole different,
Absolutely.
it
Yeah.
could have been a pop song, but my instinct is to lean the attitude towards the end, and when we get to the chorus, as opposed to is so so I'm taking the same motion from there just about to the sock, while letting the excitement of everyone know that although we wanna, you know, keep it real, but we're gonna land like around here right now. So, you know, it's just what made us, you know.
Yeah. And you touched on this too, Charlie, where you put the cymbal crashes, you know, where you put drop those little bombs, those little sections, you know, in the beginning or throughout the song really, but you know, right, I'm going to show you what I mean. I mean, it's like,
symbols.
Yeah.
Big statement.
Thought of that.
Big statement.
The arrangement, you know, is.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just cue this up. First time I heard this song, cymbal crashes that got my attention. Yeah, it's where they're placed. Yeah. They're just, you know, they're just not where you expect them to be all the time. And it's so well done.
That can annoy people too.
Yeah, I suppose it can.
Certain types of people.
Oh, man. All right.
Because, you know, air drummers that love to mark shit, you know, I could totally mess their game up.
That's right.
The one thing that I've always noticed.
That'll, you know, so playing that song, you know, there wasn't too much to think about where it was just part of the song. So whenever I would play the song, it would pretty much, it's not like it had to be the same. It just seemed like the right place to land.
Yeah.
So if you hear any other version of me playing it, it's pretty much, it's part of the song. So it's part of the arrangement. There's just, I just don't hear a crash really, other than punctuating those moments.
Exactly. They're punctuations versus like what you think of as a crash in a song.
Yeah.
Don, were you going to add something?
One thing that I've noticed about this song, and in a lot of songs that in the big band era, is how jazz and how you throw that element into the song, is the accenting of the bass drum and how it follows the vocal line in the chorus. The chorus and his voice and the bass drum just lock and dance together so well. And that's missed in so much new current music.
Yeah.
You know, that's so important. And that first time I heard that, it just blew my mind. It's like, why? What? That's why, because it makes total sense.
Yeah.
You know, as a drummer, you're letting it dance, you're letting the vocal dance with you. But my question about that is, was that your first instinct to have that bass drum with the vocal line? What came in your recollection? What came first? The vocal line or the bass drum line, or was it simultaneous, you know?
So in the development, this would go back to New York a bit, because at that time, the melody, there was only like maybe like a few notes building to the melody.
Right.
the riff had come first. And so I guess if Steve and Keith had touched upon the beginning of that riff together first, and as I explained to John earlier, like the hour that Steve walked back in the studio and he had the bass on and I sat down at the drums, was like, I would have naturally gone to the tom first. Because Keith, you're making space for Keith to kind of like search for what's happening. So give him just something and just kind of lay there.
Yeah.
And then
For the
land
verse.
the attitude, and then land the attitude in the movement as he's so boom, 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 boom. It's not like hearing a drum pattern. The foot's gonna be boom, boom, boom. I'm trying to make a sound. I'm not trying to make a beat. I'm trying to make a sound.
Support the song. Support the verse.
Like John, the end. I start on the end
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
you know, and that to me is the hump of the things.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I mean, you shouldn't take it. So right there is
That's the essence of it right there. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it just kind of works throughout, and it keeps me steady, keeps the excitement of I
Yeah,
got a guitar and I'm free, like keeps you know, and then a few days later we tried again, but we kind of looking at each other like already when you kind of know it's just going to be something else if it's not that, or Steve could have sat behind it and played it, you know, and it would have just felt.
It's just so wild that the bass drum and the vocal fit so well to dance together, and it's just that's so unique. And it's
so and so I believe the story, the words, and the more the melody took shape after, you know, well after those sessions in Canada, like Steve and Keith went away to kind of really focus on the shape of it. But you know, he would have had I don't even think Take It So Hard. I don't even think those words were there when we cut it, you know. Yeah. So the motion was there, you know, and Keith, you know, thinking ahead was going, this is gonna work. I'm gonna find it, you know, I'll find the rest of it, what needs to go on top. And I don't believe there's from Keith's original rhythm track, I'm not sure there's anything on top of it. Waddy solo would have been an overdub because he would have continued to play rhythm through it, you know, because we just landed on that arrangement. We didn't kind of write the arrangement. We played it a few times. We said, maybe we'll do this loop, blah, 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 blah. I don't even think there's an edit on the tape. I don't believe. You'd have to talk to Steve or Don, who's, you know, just not with us. So,
wow, man.
As memory floss serves me at the moment.
Yeah. No, but it has that sound, like that it's played right through, like you say, it's live, everybody together in the same room, feeling everybody's vibe and mojo and
Hey man, I could just show the calculator.
Yeah.
How many bars? 4 bars.
Well, gentlemen, I'm gonna wrap it up. This has been a great episode, and I want to thank you two gentlemen for joining us at the last minute, Pierre and Don.
It's a pleasure to be in the company of the both of you. I mean, this is a great one right here.
Yeah,
wow. John, thank you, brother.
I'm so thankful, John, for you to bring my two friends here, because this was a beautiful surprise, and I love you guys.
Love these two guys, and I mean, what's better than having the man behind Keith and the man behind Charley and now Steve Jordan in the same room with us?
Hey, listen,
Doesn't get much better
I
than
was in
that.
the room with Charley playing. I know what it's like with Charley playing.
I know.
Charley Drayton, we're talking about here.
Charley Drayton.
Yeah.
And with the appearance of
Can we
Pierre
talk
and
about Charley
John,
Drayton
like,
here? Can we talk about Charley Drayton? it's Charley Drayton in the room.
I think
If
you
you
guys
have an event with Charley's on the drums, it just becomes kind of a musical thing. That's the way it is. It's history. Ain't nothing I can do about it.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, and I thank you guys for showing up. This could actually be saving the ratings just a little bit.
This is
Apologize, John.
going to be a top rated. Hey, I just have to tell Charley Drayton this. I've told you this before, and I told Pierre when we were off camera earlier, and I've probably told Don, but I have a great memory. This would have been about 10 years ago now when the Stones were out on the 50 and Counting tour, and I was contacted by our friend Billy Amendola at Modern, who was then at Modern Drummer, and Billy said, "Hey, we'd love to do something with Charley in the magazine in Modern Drummer. Can you reach out to him and ask him if he'd be interested?" And the idea would be to have Charley Drayton interview him. And so I called Charley either on the road or I saw him somewhere and I mentioned it to him. And of course, we all know his first response was, you know, I don't do interviews. You know, I don't really like to do those things. But if Charley Drayton's doing it, I'll do it. And, you know, that's always stayed with me. You know, yeah. So
I was preparing for it, and I'm still preparing for it.
beautiful. Yeah.
We're still working for the man, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, man. And with that,
That's
with
right.
these two guys here, I've got to show you something because you said 50.
Oh, that's right.
And Pierre was in Chicago with Charley, and they were United Center, I guess. They were presenting some gifts to the band, and Charley said to Pierre, what am I going to do with this? Why bother? And Pierre said, I know who.
Oh, come on. Look at that.
Got all these friends, you know, you could gift this to Charley. I mean, I know it's not going to really, shouldn't really.
Because yes, I'm a hockey fan, so.
Yeah. Look at that, man. I could picture Charlie Watts saying, "What am I supposed to do with this?"
Yeah.
How many drummers are hockey fans? It's all the sticks. The sticks.
The sticks and the hockey.
It went to a great home. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. I'm going to end the broadcast. Thank everybody at home watching today.
They'll get you out.
And thank you for watching Track Talk. And I'll see you all real soon. Thanks.
Tracks on.